teachers at Reddit, what was the best excuse for being late that turned out to be true? A kid missed my first period class one morning, but was in school later that day. When I asked him why he hadn't arrived in time for my course, he said his cow was birthing its calf that morning, so he'd picked being in the barn over English. Made sense to me. His essays weren't going to win any ribbons at the county fair, but his calf could. This happened to me as a pupil. A very quiet, unassuming kid in our class came into German with about 5 minutes of the class left. We went to a Catholic school and the teachers were all quite strict and intimidating. Classes were usually silent, especially in junior school. When this boy came into class at the end of the lesson that day, the door flew inwards with such force that the teacher gave an audible gasp. It had been raining heavily outside. His hair was plastered to his forehead. His blazer was dripping and sodden. He had mud caked into his trousers up to his knees, and he was breathing heavily. The teacher exclaimed, "Sir Brandon, what happened?" We all stared up at him in shocked silence. This quiet, unassuming little boy let out a big sigh and just said, "Sai," took a shortcut and went straight to his seat. That line became iconic in our school for years afterwards. Told me he got pulled over by the cops for wobbly driving on his bike and they thought he was drunk. Turned out he was just dodging all the slugs on the street. Not me, but in my class. This was in college. Student turned in work late after not showing up for 2 classes. 2 classes amounted to a full week, so it was noticeable. Professor looked at him and said, "I hope somebody died for you to be this late. Does my dad count?" Honestly, I've always heard you can hear a pin drop and never really thought anything of it. But yeah, you could hear a ducking pin cut through the air after that. One of my organ students told me he was late arriving for his lesson because he got stuck behind a lengthy funeral procession en route to the cemetery. I knew he was telling the truth because I had played the organ for the service earlier that morning and the church was packed. A kid's apartment burned down overnight. He was a little late, but still came. In my hometown, if you walked into anywhere late and said the phrase "sorry, grain train," you were never challenged. It was extremely common for 50+ carriage trains to run through the middle of town. I had a teacher who showed up about halfway through the class. Apparently her car had slid. Intense snowstorm the night before, and she had walked the last mile or so. I had a 6-year-old turn up late to her lesson and blurt out, "Sorry, I was late. I had to color in a bunny." Seems fair. I apologize that I'm writing this on mobile, so there might be errors. I'm an English professor, and one year a pretty good student showed up without one of his 2 major term papers. He explained that his safe had been stolen by a contractor who was working on their house. His laptop was in the safe, and that's where his paper was. I genuinely believe him because he'd been a really good student. Then over the next few weeks, he started to show up to class looking very tired. He said that he was on a hunt for the person who stole his safe, and he was spending late nights with his cousin driving around looking for the guy because they knew his van. Now, the student and his cousin were both recently back from tours in Iraq and had seen combat experience. They wanted to find the guy to beat the it out of him and get the safe back because his wife's wedding ring was in the safe as well as a bunch of cash. He rewrote the paper and turned it in, apologetic that it wasn't up to his usual quality, but he still kept coming to class looking like he hadn't slept. After a little while he came very happy to my office hours, and he reported that he found the guy after a long search that involved breaking into a meth den, shaking people down with baseball bats and even bribing some prostitutes. He said that they found the guy's van at a Taco Bell after getting a tip from a prostitute, and they cornered him and waited for the police to come. I read in the news that he had in fact done a citizen's arrest and stopped the guy at a Taco Bell, and that they ended up calling in the Secret Service because he used the cash that he stole from the safe to buy a bunch of counterfeiting equipment. Secret Service apparently investigates counterfeiting. So the whole investigation happened because this guy, who I dubbed the White Shaft, tracked the scumbag down through the bad side of town late at night to get a wedding ring, some cash, and his research paper back. It all turned out to be true. He got the ring and the laptop back. I gladly accepted his original paper, and it got a much higher grade than the rewrite. Edit. Thank you, kind strangers, for the rewards and upvotes. I'm pretty blown away by the response. I'm trying to read all the comments, but it's making me a bad teacher. I don't want to have my head stuck on my phone during class and miss the student who might generate the sequel. Edit 2. A couple people asked for more details, so here are a few more. I can't recall the year this happened, but it was the height of the war with the US and Iraq. My student had enrolled in the army right after 9/11 on the same day as his cousin. They were both just out of high school and enrolled due to patriotism and frustration. According to him, when he started his vigilante spree, he actually went inside of a house used by meth addicts to try and find the guy. They shook the house down with baseball bats and forced everyone out into the street. When the cops showed up, they told my student how dangerous this was and not to do it again. Then, they gave him their cards and said, "But call us if you do." They shook down at least 2 other drug dens, and the same cop was waiting outside both times to arrest people since he didn't need to get a search warrant as everyone was outside now at the point of 2 baseball bats. I told my student how dangerous this all was, and he was very John Wick about getting his wife's wedding ring back. Also, I tried to find a link to the story, but it was a small story, and the Googles aren't being very helpful, especially since I can't remember the year. Again, thanks for the love and the gold, kind ones. MTV paid me $50 to fill my backpack with cement and carry it around for the day. I accepted that excuse. Student later regretted it, as a replacement backpack and college textbooks far exceeded $50. But he got his moment of fame and I didn't penalize him for his tardy. Gotta live a little. Edit. Someone found a newspaper article on this. Turns out it was $200. He earned $100 for the first day and $100 when he returned the next day. I remembered $50, but it was 19 years ago. So I was right to believe him. He still lost all his stuff, thanks cement. And I remember him telling me it wasn't worth it. And edit. Typo. UK. A student couldn't submit an assignment on time as the Wi-Fi was down on the megabus. Edit. Cheers for all the love and I'll be sure to tell the student his megabus mishap is relatable across the globe. We had an exam in my class and the teacher got a message from a student saying that he was going to be late because his car had a flat tire. The student was known to party. The teacher didn't think it could be true, so as a joke the teacher asked him to bring the tire back. He brought the flat tire back in the middle of the exam. Needless to say, the professor didn't expect that. When I was in college, my psych professor told us that the only excuse for being late was a funeral procession. Any other reason, you wouldn't be allowed to come in. A few weeks into the semester, I was headed from one building to another, which involved crossing the main road. Lo and behold, there was one very long funeral procession going by. I got a short video of it as proof, then stood on the sidewalk to let it go by. Unfortunately, the procession made me 5 minutes late to class. I knocked on the door, and the professor came over to start to tell me off. I showed her the video. Well, I'll be damned. Come on in. My best friend and I used to roller skate to school and one day we both forgot to put our shoes in our backpacks. So we skated to the vice principal's office and got to skip first period to go home for shoes. We stopped at Taco Bell on the way back for breakfast, because we figured we were already excused. Literally today, child missed my first hour class. Note said car accident on the way to school and would be coming late. Kid comes for second hour. Has pictures on his phone of the rollover accident. WTF. Kid, go home. Rest. Take care of yourself. Edit. I have another one. Although this one happened to a classmate when we were in college training to be teachers. She missed a really important class. Came for just the last 10 minutes or so because her neighbor knocked on her door while in active labor asking for help a little while before she was supposed to leave for class. Classmate walked back to neighbor's house with prego neighbor and delivered her baby in the living room while on the phone to 911. Paramedics came and mom and baby were fine, but classmate needed to go home and shower change first because she was covered in blood. I was one of about 20 kids who were late to school. We showed up at the school office as a group and when questioned why we were late, we said the school bus blew up. They questioned so the engine blew up. The kids know. The whole bus. In flames. It blew up. There was much conference between the teachers, all of them thinking we embellished the story. Next thing you know, one of the admin staff has the news website open. Very obvious image of an entire bus on fire with a bunch of kids in our school uniform standing in front of it. Our late slip for class read school bus blew up. Not a teacher but a friend said his house blew away. Apparently. Tornado. I was the student. My neighbor had a really social goat, and she figured out how to escape her pen in order to come over and hang out. She escaped and followed me to the bus stop, and when the bus came, she tried to follow me onto it. I couldn't actually get on the bus without her being right behind me, so I had to get off, bring her home, and call my dad to bring me to school. Edit. Spelling. After 9/11, my small town high school received bomb threats every week for 2 months, and they decided to make us attend school on a Saturday. Myself and about 5 others showed up for our classes, and every teacher said something like, "I can't wait for the excuses on Monday." Most of the excuses were something along the lines of family plans or whatnot, but one kid was made read his dad's note aloud to the class because our first period teacher thought it was hilarious, in the most down south accent you can imagine. It went something like, "My son ain't too smart, but he knows you ain't supposed to get punished for someone else being a dumbass. Bought him a 6-pack, so he was drunk. Y'all can FCK off." I wish we had smartphones to record back then so I could share it. She had to take her sister to school and drive her mom to rehab. She was always late to class because her mom just wanted to sleep in. Problem was, if the mom was late or did not go, she would have violated her probation and gone to prison. I never marked her late. If she missed anything important, she could come in at lunch or after school to make it up. Not a student, but one of my teaching assistants when I ran a preschool in West Philly. "Sorry I missed yesterday. My friend shot my mom." Naturally, I'm a little speechless. "Oh no, it's okay. He was aiming for someone else." A guy in my college class missed class one day. The next day he came in with his eye covered up and medical paperwork in hand. Apparently he got pecked in the eye by a chicken. Me. My bus hit a bird and the whole windshield was cracked. We had to wait for another bus to pick us up. When I was student teaching, I was late because there was bunch chickens in the middle of the road. They wouldn't move at all. This is in the middle of a city of 200,000 people. Freaking chickens. I finally get to school and profusely apologized to my mentor teacher, and I told her why I was late, thinking it sounded ridiculous. She said, "Yeah, those chickens are ducking assholes. They surrounded my car in the McDonald's parking lot last year. Don't worry about." Not me, but one of my good friends. She went to the Royal Military College of Canada, where they wear their uniforms and there are often tourists visiting the campus. Apparently, it was completely normal to be waylaid by tourists looking to have their photos taken with students in uniform that all they had to say when they walked in late was tourists, and the professors would let it slide. She always wondered how many family photos she was actually in over her time spent there. My car got hit by lightning. It did. In the school parking lot. Her tires were melted to the pavement. She had to go out and deal with the tow truck, call her parents, etc. It was pretty dramatic. I was the student. When I was in college, I opened my front door to CSWAT teams and D agents outside of my house. The one who looked at me was holding some kind of AR. I went back inside. From what I heard, there was a multiple sting operation that happened around my town and my neighbor's place got raided. I missed half of my classes that day. Not school, but I got robbed at gunpoint and my car stolen the previous night and was talking to cops detectives until the early hours of the morning. But being the dedicated corporate slave I am, I showed up to work the next day, albeit an hour or so late. Even in public accounting they understood and even said, "You know, this is clearly an appropriate reason to not come into work, right?" Looking back, I probably should have taken that day off. If anything, this made my co-workers think I'm some crazy person for just brushing the whole incident off as no big deal and coming into work. Edit. So thanks for the awards but not necessary. I didn't think this would even be read by more than a few. Student told me he couldn't do the work because he was delivering oil from 3 PM until 11 PM. In middle school. He wasn't lying. Dad has broken his both of shoulders and one clavicle, so his grandma and pregnant mom were switching off driving. Pretty sure he was doing most of it at night, and he was hooking the tanks to the oil. I called all his teachers and had his workload lightened and got permission for him to come in an hour late each day as he was providing the only income for his family of 8, as he was the oldest. Tutored him so he could pass 7th grade. Paid cost of oil only for years until I moved out of the area. Flock of wild turkeys in the road. Not always school, but this happened more than once in my life. For those of you who have never found yourselves in this situation, there is no way out of it. Wild turkeys will move when they damn well decide to do so, and only then. This was me as a student. My parents thought I get President's Day off so they didn't wake me up. In high school I biked to class. One day I hit a rock and ate absolute it. I obviously got to class late. Before I could say a word my teacher stopped class and said thank you for finally joining us. Why are you so late? I raised my heavily bloodied hands and elbows. It must have looked bad because she audibly gasped and rushed me to the school nurse apologizing non-stop the entire way. Edit. My B. I'm not a teacher. Bear on the backyard. No access gate. Animal control had to trank it from the room and drag it through the house. Made the news. Got to retake the test I missed after sending her the news article. I'm Pink. A fair-skinned student, age 10, went with a friend to the holy festival at a nearby Hindu temple where she was covered with red powder and dyed bright red from head to toe. Her mother, another teacher at the school, had made her sit for hours in the bathtub to soak it off. But even after another round of early morning shower scrubbing, she arrived at school a pleasant shade of pink. Technically, she wasn't late, but she stayed in her mother's classroom until the bell rang. Student here. I headed into school early to get some studying done in the library before my night class. I was one exit away when I was caught in a 3-car accident. Most of the expressway afterwards was gridlock with only one lane left open. I did eventually make it into my lab class 15 minutes late, with a few scrapes and bruises. My professor's reaction was simply, "Oh, that was you." I had a chemistry professor show up about 15 minutes late, just when people were about to leave. He shows up and explains that he was just in a car accident. His car had been in a rollover and he still showed up. He said he was okay. He drove a Volvo. I had a student whose father had died and had not done any homework or prep for the geography class. From what I heard, the teacher scolded him for not doing so, but the student didn't want to say anything. Presumably sensitive issue. So his best friend shouted at the teacher, "Don't you have any shame? His father died last night," and the teacher said, "I don't care." There was an audible gasp and I was in the next room. Needless to say, that teacher is no longer employed here. Obligatory not a teacher, but I'm an admin at a music school. I had a mom frantically call me and let me know her daughter would probably be late or miss their guitar lesson in a couple hours cause she couldn't find the kid. I was just kind of like, okay, well, I will let her teacher know. Got another call about an hour later from the same mom. She found her kid, but apparently the daughter went to a friend's house and decided to dye her hair green. They lived pretty closely, so I did let them know they could still come in for their lesson. Mom said she would call me back and let me know in a minute or two. Never called back. Her daughter showed up for her lesson about 5 minutes late with this bright green coiffure. I gotta admit it looked rad as duck, but also kind of a confusing thing to be an audience to the build up. Edit. Thank you for the award. It's my first one. D. Not a teacher, but I was training a new hire at a job and the guy came in 45 minutes late stating he got halfway to work and realized he didn't have shoes on. It was winter and like 15 degrees outside. Me. My car froze shut. We had an ice storm and this was before the fancy power locks and keyless entry were a thing. Edit. This blew the F up. Whoa. School sporting event. Kid on our team was late because someone stole his windshield wipers and it was snowing out. Kept having to pull over to the side of the road and wipe off his windshield. I'm not the teacher, but we were told that he had a paramedic student who on their way to write their final exam rolled their car into a creek, picked up whatever books they had out of their car and ran the rest of the way to class. Obviously got there late and in tears. You better believe they had a different exam date. Not a teacher, but I was hit by a car on my bike to uni and my prof was more than understanding as to why I was late. Not a teacher, but a kid walked into my class one day and literally just said, "Sorry, I'm late. I didn't want to be here." He wasn't wrong, I suppose. Sorry, Bohemian Rhapsody came on just as I parked my art teacher when he was about 5:55 minutes late. I've told this story before. Obligatory, not a teacher, but a student. I was constantly late to a class my senior year of high school. I had depression and was on a 504 plan as a result. For this reason, I was allowed some extra time in the hallways before class to recover from the mental stress of being in a class, etc. It was super helpful, and yes, a pretty weird 504 plan. One time I was running late and witnessed a car hit a pedestrian crossing the road, severely injuring him, and the car drove away. My brother, who was into cars, recognized the car and identified it to me as our neighbor who was also in my first period. I stopped to help the pedestrian, also a student at the school, because I had some first aid lifeguard training. I called him an ambulance and waited for it to show up. I also called the school and told them that he would be going to the hospital. Yep, pretty nice of me. When I got to school, my brother and I went down to the front office to get a note for tardiness. The admin I called was waiting there. He thanked me, gave me a note, and told me to tell the teacher if there were any questions to call him. My brother told him about the car that he had recognized and that we knew the driver and who that person was. We both went to our classes. I got to first period late again and my teacher didn't even want to hear my excuse. I pressed the note into her hand and told her the story anyway. The driver of the car was sitting in the back of the classroom with a guilty look on her face. She looked scared shitless, and my teacher wouldn't stop giving me it for my lie. I gave up and waited for justice to take its course. For the record, I never lied when I came to class late. I always told the truth. I slept late. I never invoked my 504 plan for that particular class, even though my teacher knew about it and would be forced to accept it. Halfway through class, the administrator entered with the school resource officer and informed my teacher that the student needed to come with him right now for a hit and run. He saw that I was sitting there and thanked me again for my help and for putting another person's needs above my own. Man, it was nice to help that kid, but it was really nice to see my teacher's face go from disgusted at the driver to shocked and disgusted when she realized my story was true. A little off topic, but in 8th grade a friend of mine turned in her homework late because her dog literally ate her homework. She even brought a note from her parents. I was the student. I was walking to school and 2 of our cats were following me. I had to round them up and take them home. My dad wrote me a note for my lateness, which included the phrase "animal show and tell day." Edit. Or thanks for all the awards. Here are pictures of the cats. The 2 that followed me were the orange one sitting on the dishwasher door and the tabby underneath it. Better picture of her included. Fun fact, all but one cat, the tabby in the middle, had the same mother. My best friend at the time was doing a carer's job in preparation to later do nursing. He lived a train ride away at the time, but it was okay because work was 5 minutes from the train station. Someone jumped in front of his train as it was approaching the station. Everyone's stuck on the train whilst it's established if the person can be saved and if it's a crime scene on the tracks. Hours later he gets into work a little cheesed off but apologizes and promptly finds out it was one of the patients who had made him late for work. It was a semi-secure hospital for adults with dementia. Edit. I missed the teacher's part. Oops. I am a teacher, but this happened when I was a student. Does it count? In high school a kid came late to history class. He was a joker, so when someone asked him where he had been, he goes, "I was kidnapped." Everyone laughed, until he goes, "No really." Turns out 2 guys kidnapped him and tossed him into the back of the minivan he was using for his morning paper route. They drove him around while they robbed something. I can't remember what happens after. I think they just drove the van somewhere and got away. My auto teacher let me practice removing and adding the tires on his vehicle. The next morning it was about 20 minutes into first period and no sign of him. He comes running into the classroom out of breath and his hair is all messed up. He points at me and says, "What is a torque wrench used for?" I respond with, "I don't know." He says, "I know you don't know." Turns out one of his tires came off while driving down the highway. Former student here. Sorry, boss. My stepdad tried to kill us last night and I had to deal with the cops. Professor just looked at me for a moment and said, dudes, do you want to go grab a drink and talk about this after class? Man, my English prof was a bro when I was in college. My best story ever. I taught in a hardcore inner city school. My student comes in at 10:30. I was like, dude, where were you? Oh, my bus was late. Yeah. No. Why would your bus be 3 hours late? Well, miss, there was a drive-by shooting. OMG, are you okay? Someone shot at the bus. No ma'am. A kid shot a gun out of the bus. We got pulled over. The cops had to search everyone. The kid with the gun was literally the last kid to be searched. True story. You can't make this it up.